Roze of the Recapture keeps testing my patience with their attempts to recapture the magic of the original series by recreating moments from the original anime without understanding why those moments work to begin with. At this point, Lelouch has to be thinking.
Just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in.
These problems were apparent in episode 1 and were only exacerbated in episode 2. Episode 3 was also guilty of this, but it seemed to be moving in a positive direction, focusing on the future as opposed to relying on the past. But then episode 4 happened.
I find myself frustrated. We should have had you and Mr. Toto with us sooner.
You overestimate me. The Situmpe Wall is powerful, and Norland von Luneborg is formidable.
You'd think so, but you'd be wrong.
Not only does this episode continue this terrible trend, but it also introduces a slew of problems that blow holes in this already weak plot. It seems like this series is hoping that the fan service, which is excessive even for Code Geass standards, and the member berries is enough to distract you from these serious issues. And it somewhat works because the only reason why I rated this episode higher than 2 was seeing C2 and L2 together again and Nina's appearance. I am impressed with how she's grown since R1, R2, The Zero Requiem, Resurrection, and now. But even this well executed, brilliant part can't save this episode. So since I have already recapped the episode, link in the description below, let's just start going through all these things that pissed me off. Before I get started, don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss my future videos answering your questions on the series, like what's the deal with Lelouch, or how the Damocles came back, and the current political climate. But for right now, let's go back to my issues with episode 4, starting with Haruka. So Roze decides to give Haruka the Kisetsu, making her officially the ace pilot of the 7 Shining Stars. We even see the series paying homage to the original anime, where Roze throws the keys at her, just like how Lelouch threw the key to Kallen in stage 10. I even praised the scene during my reaction when watching the trailers, but I feel the opposite now, knowing the full context. The biggest issue here is that Haruka hasn't earned this. We haven't seen anything on screen to suggest that she is their best pilot, besides her being a large fish in a small bowl, but not something on the level of Kallen. During this episode, Roze mentioned that despite having a decent device or point, she had lots of potential. I find this odd because in the original anime, Suzaku first excelled in the simulator, then after using a landslide in real life, Lloyd showed the new device or point, which was really high. I assume you have to first use the nightmare frame in question, and then you get a device or point. So since Haruka hasn't used the Kisetsu yet, Roze is using the data from the Akatsuki to make this baseless claim. I mean, Haruka doesn't even use a simulator for the Kisetsu, instead taking practice in a shooting range using a normal gun. In Lost Stories, we learn that these simulators aren't that large or hard to come by, so I don't know why we couldn't have seen one here. Another annoying thing is that despite having a decent device or point, Roze blames the Akatsuki for Haruka's poor performance. She believes that a better nightmare frame would unlock her true abilities. This bothers me because it implies that the nightmare frame makes the pilot as opposed to the opposite. We already have examples like Kallen, Mario/Maya, and Cornelia who could perform at a high level in any nightmare frame they used. The lower generation nightmare frames did limit what they could do, but they still performed at a high level. This isn't the case when it comes to Haruka. Simply put, you need to show an impressive aptitude in using a lower generation nightmare frame to justify using an elite model. They are doing the opposite when it comes to Haruka. The only pilot I can think of who was somewhat in a similar situation was Lelouch, who did need a specific nightmare frame to utilize his abilities. But Lelouch was a lower tier pilot compared to the powerful ones in the series, and definitely not ace material. Roze later on justified this decision to give Haruka the Kisetsu based on her excellent judgment on the battlefield and quick instincts, except we haven't seen this to understand what the hell she's talking about. Now, I know what you're thinking. Well, Mr. Chips, Roze of the Recapture is only 12 episodes, so they don't have enough time to show this in comparison to the original anime. Well, that's BS, because you can make the series longer than 12 episodes. But this isn't even an issue of not having enough time, more like not properly using the time that was given to you. Kallen only battles in a nightmare frame in 3 episodes prior to getting the Gurren Mark II. During each occasion, they brilliantly showed why she would inevitably become the ace pilot of the Black Knights. In episode 1, she escaped Jeremiah by launching her Glasgow's arm, a tactic used by Cornelia and Suzaku, both advanced pilots. Kallen also held her own for a bit against not only a better model, the Sarlin, but Jeremiah, an elite nightmare frame pilot. In episode 2, she took out a Sarlin with a one-armed Glasgow and lasted longer against the Lancelot than her comrades, despite the fact that they were using Sarlins. I don't even need to mention that in stage 9, despite dealing with immense regret and guilt with her mother, Kallen was able to bounce back and take out a night police nightmare frame which nearly killed her, but I just did. Now let's compare that to Haruka. What do we see from her? In episode 2, she takes out maybe 2 Camdens by using the /Harken before another Camden takes her out. She lost because of difference in specs.
Blink, and you'll miss it.
Now I won't say what she did there wasn't impressive, but not to the same level as Kallen. They even copied the part where Jeremiah called Kallen's nightmare frame a piece of junk, which was really frustrating. The series wants you to accept that all this stuff happened off screen since we don't see it on screen. And I only bring up this comparison between Kallen and Haruka because the series is doing it themselves. They clearly want Haruka to be the next Kallen based on the nightmare frame angles, especially the ass shots, making her the ace pilot and having Roze throw the key at her. But it feels forced here. You can't take superficial elements from Kallen's character, transfer them to Haruka, and expect it to naturally fit. The writers don't understand why this worked in the original anime and why it doesn't here. Kallen was the best pilot in the Black Knights even when Toto joined them. Haruka isn't the best pilot, Ash is, and it sounds like Kuroto is better as well, so the term ace pilot doesn't really mean anything here. There was so much more depth to the scene where Zero throws the key to Kallen, especially in Kallen's reluctantness to take it given that Zero is their leader. This line in particular always stood out to me.
Besides, you have reason to fight.
There was also more room to breathe during this scene to take it all in. Here, they immediately rushed to the next part with the Damocles. Also, I hated how they kept discussing who's going to be the next ace pilot. It just trivialized the entire part and didn't feel organic at all. It's actually ironic because they spent more time discussing who should be the ace pilot than actually showing scenes of Haruka kicking ass and demonstrating these skills to justify why she should be the ace pilot, so we the audience already know it should be her, besides the fact that she copied Kallen's ass shots. This isn't how you recapture the magic of the original anime. Let's move on to the conversation between Shiro and Cornelia, during which both sides mentioned things that pissed me off. For example, the Black Knights didn't wait for Cornelia or Toto before conducting the first 2 liberation operations to liberate the Hokkaido block. If they did, we wouldn't be here right now. They better explain why they couldn't be present for that. To make matters worse, Shiro didn't even mention the likes of Kallen, Gino, Anya, Jerry, Suzaku, or Forknar as other pilots who could have also assisted in this. Did they not know about the other pilots? If so, why not? Everyone in this series has amnesia, so it's entirely possible.
And by the way,
I know that's not true.
I was being sarcastic.
It's insane to me that despite recognizing that Norland isn't someone to be trifled with, they didn't send in the big guns like they did with Zilkstan. And yes, I am aware of what the pan flip said, and no, that doesn't explain anything. Video on that soon.
Look forward to it.
Anyways, Cornelia Cornelia then played defense for the writers by saying she's not that good and the Situmpe Wall is actually strong, and then claims that Norland is a powerful foe, implying she couldn't take him in a fight. No, the Situmpe Wall is not that strong because the writers stupidly proved it later on in this episode, and no, I doubt Norland could take Cornelia any day of the week. Putting that aside, why didn't Lelouch take him out during his reign as emperor? Jerry was cleaning house, so what the heck happened? It's almost like he didn't seem to exist then. I hate it when the writers have to retcon an established story to introduce plot relevant characters in sequels or prequels. It ruins everything. Norland is no exception. Now back to the Situmpe Wall. What I find hilarious about Cornelia's statement is that she then approves sending nightmare frames to the 7 shining stars. The nightmare frames came through a submarine, which I assume went under the Situmpe Wall. If that's true, then it means that the Situmpe Wall doesn't work on things underwater, or at the very least, they can send nightmare frames underwater to use against it. This brings up a slew of problems. If they can send nightmare frames in secret this way, then why not send Zaku, Ginu, and so forth on one sub equipped with powerful nightmare frames and take out the wall, or just transport regular Black Knight members to infiltrate Neo Britannia to take out the wall through other means. The story just created a situation where there are so many ways to resolve the conflict, and yet none of them happened. They were trying to create this parallel in the original series where Kuroto gave the Black Knights nightmare frames, but didn't understand why that works and this doesn't.
Seriously? Fuck off, show.
This entire series hangs on the premise that this wall is preventing the Black Knights from obliterating Neo Britannia, but continues to show that the wall isn't a legit threat. I find it hilarious that Shiro stated they're still analyzing the wall. They must have done some level of analysis to know that they can transport nightmare frames under it. What's even going on anymore? You could argue that they are cautious because of the Flea and the Damocles, but that doesn't work for many reasons. 1. They could have used these tactics early on to resolve the problem. 2. If Nina has a brand new Flea Eliminator, then you can assume they also have new countermeasures for the Blade's luminous shields. 3. They should have intercepted the Damocles on its way to the Kaido block, meaning we shouldn't even be here at this point. 4. Based on the pan flip, this Damocles isn't the same as Schnizel's, as it's not able to fly the same heights, so you can't treat it as the same type of threat. 5. This new Damocles was an abandoned backup that no one thought of destroying after the Zero Requiem, meaning once again we shouldn't be here at this point. And 6. Neo Britannia had this thing for over 4 years, and they still tried to liberate the Hokkaido block anyways. Make this make sense. This is why I was angry during the Damocles launch at the end of the episode instead of getting excited due to the epic music to cover up the stupidity behind all this. Next, we gotta talk about this one part where Roze has an article open on her tablet that reads, "Some wonder if new Emperor Sakya gets along with other nations." The article itself makes no sense since Norland illegally occupied a territory in Japan and the UFN doesn't recognize it. Since they are working with the Black Knights to liberate the area. So which nations is it referring to? Neo Britannia is not a legit nation. Why would anyone work with them when they are using the same weapon that Lelouch terrorized the world with not too long ago? This isn't the same thing with the original Britannia Empire. Schnizel isn't Norland and was trying to make peace with other nations, and Britannia was a recognized nation. They are ignoring the current political climate with this bullshit. To follow up on this, where did all of these people come from? I know that the Hokkaido block in real life has a population of over 5 million people, but I assumed in this series that that population would mostly be Japanese and the Britannians from the previous occupation. These people seem to be followers of Norland from Luneburg. I doubt they came during the initial occupation since they aren't soldiers, which means they immigrated later on. But why would the UFN allow that? Why didn't they blockade this nation as soon as it came into being? They could have starved the area of resources, forcing Norland to surrender. Whatever, plot has to plot. Moving on, let's talk about the strange tensions between the Japanese and the Britannians in this series. Prior to the formation of Neo Britannia, the world was at peace with both sides working together, but you would never know that based on the actions of these characters. There should be nothing wrong with relying on Britannians to fight Neo Britannia. There should be nothing wrong with Sakya being a half Britannian because Ogi, the former Prime Minister of Japan, married Valletta. Did everyone forget this? Thanks a lot, guys. You took the only positive thing about that relationship and made that pointless as well. And no one seemed upset with Jugal marrying Sherry to begin with. I can't even right now. I even find the Japanese pride aspect weird when Japan is now part of the UFN. So these people should be used to working together with other people from different nations. And another thing, why did Nina, of all people, ask Roze why she is helping the Japanese despite not being Japanese? This question doesn't make any sense given the current political climate where everyone is working together. Also, she should know better since Lelouch helped the Japanese. What a way to character assassinate someone. I was further confused why Roze told Nina to stay inside because her presence might upset some people. Again, why would it? My brain can't comprehend all this stupidity. Why is everyone still acting as if the old Britannian Empire exists when it doesn't? They're only doing this because this is how the original anime worked. But that was different because Britannia ruled 1/3 of the world and collectively persecuted the Japanese people. Now it's just one sub-faction of a fallen empire. The term Britannian doesn't mean the same thing anymore. Most of the sub-factions of Britannia are under Schneisel and don't subscribe to this bullshit. Ironically enough, this in some ways is a bigger slap to the face of the Zero Requiem than the return of the Damocles. Off topic, but somewhat on topic, if Sherry doesn't have a claim to the throne, why would Sake have a claim to the throne? You can't just tell me she does without stating how. And I've saved the best issue for last, Kuroto. So apparently he was a decorated soldier who served with the JLF. Yet in the original anime, Katase Kusakabe nor Toto ever mentioned him. I know he was Jugo's bodyguard, but if the JLF was falling apart, why wouldn't he help out? In stage 23, you can see fighting breaking out in the Hokkaido block, so that would have been the time for Kuroto to join them. I find it hard to believe that Lelouch would ignore someone like that during his time as leader of the Black Knights. It's another example of retconning the story to introduce a character that would have been plot relevant in the original anime, but wasn't due to nonsensical reasons. And worse, Kuroto only exists so he can be their Toto, just like Haruka is their Kallen. And this is my biggest problem with Roze of Recapture. I'm fine with creating characters to continue the legacy of Code Geass. In fact, that's how you should do it. Relying on Lelouch every single time is not a winning formula, but you don't accomplish this by creating a soulless copy of the original anime. And I'm not saying that Roze of Recapture doesn't bring anything new to the table, but those new things are overshadowed by their failed attempts to recreate the magic from the original anime. People love to shit on Akito for its problems, understandably so, but at least they did this. The series felt fresh by comparison, as did Oz, for any that have read it. I'm trying to enjoy this series, but doing it in this way is both unnecessary and lazy. Combine that with a rushed plot, and Roze is kind of a mess right now. There's only so much fan service and member berries you can use right before people realize that the Emperor has no clothes.